you need a set of paints. I'm using watercolour paints and I'm using only the 3 primary colours, so red, yellow and blue, and then black and white. A selection of brushes. I've got a wide brush to paint my background with, I've got some sponges to create some texture with, and I've got a selection of different sized brushes, some nice thin ones and some slightly thicker ones, so I can get a varying difference of line. A pot of water. So you should have a drawing that looks a little bit like this. I want you to place that drawing onto some newspaper and get your paints out. If we have a quick look again at Kandinsky's work, you'll notice that his backgrounds are really light, so we're going to do a light wash first and then you're going to let it dry. So this whole process should take you a fair amount of time. I've done these paintings and they've taken 3 lessons, so 3 hours if you've got an hour lesson every week, because you need that time in between to dry. So this could be a task that you do over a series of days. Now I'm going to show you how I mix colours, and we're going to go with a nice light yellow first. So I'm going to load up my brush, and I'm using quite a large square brush. I'm going to load up the brush with lots of white paint. I'm going to place it onto a palette. And this is the bit that takes quite a while because sometimes you need to really work that paint if they're a bit dry. And then I'm going to rinse my brush out. I'm going to load the brush up with a bit of yellow. And I'm going to mix it into that white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the whole of my page, which is why I need the newspaper now, because we're going all the way up to the edges. Now it needs to be quite light and a nice wash, and you need to always make sure that you paint in the same direction. You might want to keep it quite watery so the colour becomes lighter, pick up a little bit more colour. If you're running out of paint, then you just need to mix your colour back in again. And I like that it changes slightly. I like that it doesn't look exactly the same colour throughout. You've got a little bit of blending going on. Oops. So if we look at this particular piece of work by Kandinsky, you can see the edge here where he's got a different colour coming through. And to do that, I'm just going to use the pure blue that I've got in the palette. I'm not going to make it into anything different. I'm just going to make it nice and soft, and then I'm going to use a sponge stick, or any kind of sponge will do, an old dish sponge, scrubbing sponge, it doesn't matter. I generally have lots of bits of sponge lying around the classroom, but you're going to load up your sponge with a little bit of paint. The newspaper is great for testing onto as well. If it needs a little bit more water, then you can decide that. And I'm just going to sponge the edges a little bit. And I'm going to keep twisting my sponge brush around so I get different textures. I did a little bit more water now, and I'm going to go into this top corner. You can see here where the paint is more watery and is less textured than this side here, and that's quite nice to have some of those differences. But always test it on your newspaper first to make sure that you've got the right texture that you're looking for. Now don't overdo this part, because you can go a little bit over the top with this and get a bit sponge happy, but a little bit like that is probably enough. We're going to let that dry and we're going to come back to it. So that's nearly dry, and it means that I can now talk to you a little bit about colour theory. There is a version of this colour wheel at the end of the video, which you can have a look at. We're using our 3 primary colours here, so your red, your yellow and your blue. And when you mix these colours together, when you mix 2 of these colours together, you get a secondary colour. So red and yellow make orange, red and blue make purple, blue and yellow make green. and those are your secondary colours, okay? And if you look at the outer edge of this colour wheel, you have your tertiary colours, which are the colours that you get when you mix a primary colour and its secondary colour. Okay, so you've got a red and you've got an orange, and you mix them together, you get a reddy orange, orange and yellow, orangey yellow, etc., etc., as you go around. And using this principle of colours working well together, or colours that are next to each other on the colour wheel, will really help you with your blending technique when it comes to painting. So I'm going to go through a few of those techniques now. I'm going to use a medium-sized brush, and I've got a piece of kitchen towel just to mop up the colour off my brush if I'm changing different colours around. I'm going to start with one of these circles here, and I'm going to go with a nice bright green, and I always start with my lightest colour first. So I'm picking up the yellow, which into my palette. I think this brush has already got a little bit of blue on it. And then I'm going to rinse my brush out, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of blue. And add that to that. And then I'm going to use that colour in this section here. Now, if you watched the video on colouring in this task, you will notice that I'm using the same technique of following the shape. Okay, now it's really, really important that you follow the curve of the circle when you are painting, so your shape's nice and smooth, it looks neat, and your brush strokes all kind of follow the same direction. I'm just going to go around this shape here. So you notice that I did the outlines first, and then I've filled in the gap. Now I'm thinking about painting this particular bit here blue, and making this section here a greeny blue. So we've got green and blue, mix them together and make this colour here in the middle. This is quite a large area. Now I know some of you will be tempted to use a really big brush for it, but what I might do with this section is show you how to blend from blue into white. I'm going to go with just the pure blue from the palette first. I'm just going to turn my page so I've got the right angle for my hand to work in. I'm going to start at this edge here. And I'm using the whole of my brush because it's such a large area. You'll notice there that I started at this side here, went to the middle and started there and brought it together. And that's just, it helps me with the curve, so I'm not trying to bend my arm round in the wrong direction. You can just about see that line that's there. So I'm not going to finish the whole of this section because I want to show you how I blend into a different colour. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of the blue into my palette, and I'm going to try and load up quite a lot by dripping it in. And then I'm going to rinse my brush and take some white. drop some white into there. So I get a lighter blue. And then using that lighter blue, and it's very subtle, you won't see the difference just yet. But I'm only going to do a little bit like that. And then I'm going to take more white. And make that colour lighter. And then again, add another layer. Now remember, I'm still going round in this kind of curve. I'm trying to make it into a sphere. Rinse my brush, load up some more white, drop it in. Go with a layer of this colour. One more go. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it as that for the blue, and I'm just going to rinse my brush out and just go with white. And as you've probably still got a little bit of blue left on your brush, that colour becomes the perfect shade for the end bit. So you should have a nice grade of colour going from dark blue into a nice light blue. Now I'm not going to paint this section just yet because the blue is still wet, and if I paint this little bit here, it might bleed into each other. And the beauty about painting something like this, it means that you've got these other shapes on this other side here that you can be working with before you come back to that part. So I'm just going to continue working. I'll put some tips up on the screen as I speed this up so you can see what colours I'm using and why I'm using those colours. This dry and I will come back and show you how I add the black elements to it. Okay, so we're ready to start adding the black. I might add a few extra pieces as I go along, but at this stage you could add a few more details. If we have a quick look at Kandinsky's work again, you know, you've got some nice curved lines, some extra lines, different thicknesses of line. some more organic lines. So, you know, at this stage you can obviously add more to your piece of work. So I'm going to add one of those big swirls there. I'm going to add some lines on this circle, and I'm drawing these in so I know exactly where I'm going to put them when it comes to doing it in paint. I don't want to just freehand it because I don't want to make any mistakes. Might even add and I'm using a nice thin brush. I'm going to use a few different ones. I've got this one that's nice and thin. I've also got a couple which are slightly thicker to get me slightly thicker lines. So I'll just vary it as I go ahead. Now when it comes to outlining, you really need to keep your wrist quite loose, and you need to keep your page really flexible. So work in whichever way you feel comfortable, if you're left-handed, right-handed, whichever. And I'd always work away from yourself so you don't end up smudging. Nice and steady. Now you'll notice there that I ran out of paint, and that's okay, but I carried on my brush stroke right to the end. I didn't stop to go back to it because obviously I need some more paint, so I'm just going to do that part there. Now this bit does take a little bit of practice. So there, it's done. You should have been able to, within that video, practice your colour mixing skills and your painting skills, making sure that you paint in the right directions, and that you mix up your paint to the right consistency so it's not too transparent. Obviously you can keep adding to this. You could get a fine liner out and go around some of these areas that are a bit more trickier, or you could use coloured pencils or oil pastels to add a bit more texture. You can go to town on this, entirely up to you. Well done, guys. I hope you've created a really interesting geometric painting based on the work of Kandinsky. Please remember to send me pictures of your work either on Instagram or Facebook and use the hashtag Mrs. Mystery Makes. At the end of this video, there are lots of different ways that you can extend the learning of this task, especially the mathematical skills involved. Yeah, enjoy. Bye, guys.